Some of you know that when I went to New Guinea, it was kind of back in the dark ages. My first year as a missionary in New Guinea was 1967. I remember that year because my firstborn child was born as I went to New Guinea. He's creeping up now. I was in a land that was puzzling, to say the least. The strangest thing of all that it took to get used to was women who would walk up to you nursing a small pig. I'll just let you digest that thought. The first time I saw it, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A small pig being breastfed. And this lady reached out to take our brand new baby to extend the privilege to him on the other side. My son hates it when I tell this story about him. Sharing breast milk with a pig is not his idea of a delightful story. And one of the older missionaries said to me, you know, the one thing you need to be careful about in New Guinea is the pigs. Because they have no money in this country. Money had not yet been introduced. And so, pigs were used for trading. You could buy your wives with pigs. You know, with your lovely long hair, you probably don't realize you are at least a 500 pig woman. And your husband would shave that hair off once a month and add it to his wig, which would get bigger and bigger. And if he had many wives, he'd have a huge wig sticking way out here. So I said to myself, okay, you can buy wives with pigs. You can trade with pigs, but the one thing you must never do is injure a pig. I said, okay, I've got it. I will never injure a pig, because if you do, and the owners of the pig are around, they will kill you instantly. I said, I've got it, trust me. I've got it, I will never injure a pig. Even though I must admit I was sorely tempted when they got into my garden times. But I never injured a pig until one Sabbath afternoon. I was working at the Sopaz Adventist Hospital, 8,000 feet up on top of a mountain in the western highlands of New Guinea. I was actually a student missionary at the time, so this was even before I went out as a regular missionary. I was a college student. And I had a little motorcycle. I was the only person in a valley of 500,000 people that had a motorcycle, had a motor vehicle. And in pidgin English, they used to call it one fella, lick, lick, putt, putt. That was my motorbike. One fella, lick, lick, putt, putt. And on Sabbath mornings, I'd go out and preach in churches. I'd visit around all the villages. And I'd ride one fella, lick, lick, putt, putt up and start circling around the mountain, because the hospital that I was working at was right on top of the mountain. And I'm halfway up the mountain on my lick, lick, putt, putt. And I came round the corner, and a little pig, about this big, must have got scared by the noise of my motorbike, and he jumped. And guess where he landed? Right in the front wheel of my motorcycle. All the spokes came off, and the pig was lying there in 100 pieces. And I said, oh, I've killed a pig! It's the biggest no-no in New Guinea. Had there been one person around, I would not be here today. But in the providence of God, there's not a single person around. Most unusual. So the motorbike was no longer rideable. So I jumped off quickly and I dug a hole in the jungle and I picked up every little piece of pig. and I buried it in the jungle, covered it with dirt and grass and leaves, and I said to myself, I think I've done a pretty good job, because I had no idea of how I was fooling myself. These people are bushwhackers. They know that I've got the only motorbike in the valley. They would find the grave. They would know that one of their little pigs was killed, but I thought I'd gotten away with it. And I pushed that little motorcycle all the way up to the top of the mountain. I was exhausted. I was staying in a house with a missionary doctor from England who had just come out to this hospital. He was the first physician to get attached to the hospital. He had just graduated from Oxford University Medical School. He didn't know a thing. So I became his assistant. We did all the surgeries together. I would read the book and tell him the next step, and he would take it. We had so much fun the whole year together. Anyway, the next morning, the physician came in to my room and said, "You awake?" I said, "Well, barely." He said, "Well, were you expecting visitors this morning?" I said, "No." Well, he said, "There's 150 naked men sitting on the back lawn. They all have bows and arrows and spears, and they're sitting in a circle, and they are demanding your presence." And he said, it's got something to do with one fellow lick pig. I said, "I know exactly what it has to do with." Luckily for me, this is the next morning. So their anger has gone down overnight, and now they're thinking, they're going to gouge me now. And I am called. I said, "They're not sitting in a circle. Please tell me they're not sitting in a circle, because in New Guinea that's a court." And when I had arrived at the capital city of New Guinea, they put two pieces of the paper in front of me and said, "Sign here or here. If you ever have a legal problem in New Guinea, you have the right to fly to the capital city if you sign here, and you can present yourself before an Australian magistrate. But if you sign here, you're saying that I'll be happy to be dealt with by tribal law." So I just said to myself, well, I'm sure that all the missionaries accept tribal law, so I'll sign here. I found out later I was the only missionary who signed that. I am now subject to tribal law. So they're calling me into court. The chief is there and 150 men. And they're going to try me for the crime of killing their little pig. So I came out and I sat in the center of the circle. And they love to talk, and they're very theatrical people. And so they start going around the circle, and everyone's having his say. And finally they come to one man who stands up. This guy was so good, he should have been given an Academy Award. And he said, "Last night, my wife went out and cried for her baby to come home. I had to put my head down so they wouldn't see me laughing. And she cried and cried all night, and the baby, of course that's the pig, did not come home. And I looked up, and 150 grown men were all weeping in sympathy with this guy. They're all sitting in the circle weeping together. I said to myself, this is too much. This is a pig. But he's talking about his wife's baby. She nursed that baby. She slept with it. It's her baby. So they went right round the circle, but the stage has been set. I am a criminal. I have killed this man's child. So they went right around the circle, and the chief said to me, "Are you guilty?" I said, "Yes, I'm guilty. I killed the pig." I'm thinking to myself of all the reasons I could give as to why I didn't deliberately. Why would I deliberately kill a pig? Anyway, he said, "Okay, so you accept responsibility?" I said, "I accept responsibility for the pig." "All right," he said, "then we have to talk about how much you have to pay for the pig." And so after 2 hours of going around the circle, he said, "We'll have another court." So we started our second session, another 2-hour session. And I went around, did the pig have a bad missionary day? Did it decide to attack me? Did I scare it? All these reasons were brought forth, and finally I said to myself, this is about to become the most expensive pig in history. And I am going to be gouged because of this little pig. I could feel it coming. Anyway, the chief said, we have agreed that you will pay, and money was just being introduced into the country. They didn't have a clue how much money they were talking about. They said it will cost you $5. Now, I could have bought 200 pigs for $5. So I said, okay, I'm just happy to be alive. $5 is fine. I'll pay $5. Then I had a brilliant idea. I said to the chief, you fellas have a lig pig belong you, fellow bugger up in motorbike belong me? Bugger up, by the way, a great pidgin word. If you bugger something up, you wreck it, you know. Do you people realise that your little pig buggered up my motorcycle? I said, yes, I can't find it. It's lying on the ground at the back of the house. Come look him. So 150 men got up and they came and looked at the motorcycle. You know, I can act too. I said, how am I going to repair this motorcycle? The nearest store is 200 miles away. Oh, leg belong me, by bugger up through. I'm going like this. I'm going to have to walk 200 miles there, order the parts, which will take 2 years to come, and then walk 200 miles back. Leg belong me, by bugger up through. And I put my head down like this, and I looked up, and 150 grown men are all weeping for me. I said to myself, Liversidge, you are good. So the chief said, we'll have to have another court. I said, no, I should have just paid the money. So we go back into court for a third time. And they finally agreed, well, we are responsible. They have a sense of fairness. We are responsible for the motorbike. So how much money will it take for you to repair your motorcycle? So I drew this out dramatically. Okay, I've got to walk 200 miles. That's 3 days walking. I've got to pay for the parts, which I will never get anyway. Then I've got to walk back. I'm going to miss a week of work. I'm calculating all this, and their anxiety is going through the roof. Finally, I said, with a very straight face, because they're watching me carefully, it looks like $5. And I didn't want to take advantage of them. And they looked at me very carefully. I said, $5? I said, yes, because it's going to cost much more than that. But I said, $5. So the chief says with a very serious face, okay, we'll have to have one more court. Around we went again. Finally, they agreed they'd have a feast that night. I would pay $5 in 10-cent coins with holes through the center, which was just being introduced. They didn't even know how to count out $5. And they, in turn, would give me back the same $5. So I go down to the village. This is the big chief of the whole valley. I go down to the village for the feast, which consisted of a huge pig that was cooked in an underground oven. 4 men put it on their shoulders and carried it around, and you put your hand in, and you pulled out a handful of pig flesh. That was the feast, you know. So I grabbed a sweet potato and kept my mouth full of sweet potato for the whole meal. And finally, the chief stood up. He said, you know, Master Bill, as they called me, Master Bill has respected our customs. So we respect him. He has admitted killing our pig. He did not do it deliberately. He has even paid for that pig. And we, in turn, have paid for his motorcycle. So he said, I would like to make an announcement from now on. And he handed me 2 silver leaves from a silver palm tree that is only permitted to be grown by the big chief. Beautiful palm leaves. And he hands me the 2 leaves and he said, wherever you go in this entire valley from this moment, you can put your motorbike or your backpack or anything of your personal use. You can leave it lying in the jungle, just cross these 2 leaves, and everybody in this valley will know that you are under my personal protection. I became the safest missionary in New Guinea. I never had to look over my shoulders. I never had to worry about security, because the biggest chief of that whole valley had taken upon himself full and complete responsibility for my problem. You know what I said to myself? So I see your head nodding there, you're hearing it. This is like the good news. Sin has placed us under the most awesome burden. It's heaped all this guilt and stuff upon us. It's become the driving force and power in our lives. And yet Jesus Christ has come along and offered to take upon himself all that sin has done to us. I like to think of those 2 palm leaves. I used to cost them like this. It looked like a cross, because it reminded me of what God had done for us in Christ Jesus.